Have you ever been part of a team that just, clicked? Like everything worked. A group where individuals, maybe even against the odds, achieved something really extraordinary.
Yeah, that feeling is pretty powerful.
Exactly. And whether you're uh, wrestling with a tiny startup or maybe trying to steer a massive global company, or heck, even just trying to get a complex family project off the ground, that universal quest is always there, isn't it? How do you genuinely inspire people, get them to perform at their peak?
And maybe more importantly, how do you create an environment where they consistently deliver their absolute best work? It's not just about one-off successes.
Right. So today we're plunging into one of the most fundamental and honestly fiercely debated questions in organizational culture. It really boils down to how we build those high-performance cultures.
Is the ultimate path like giving your people maximum freedom and responsibility, just letting them innovate, self-direct, minimal oversight?
Or is the opposite?
Yeah.
Establishing a meticulously structured, principles-driven framework where clarity, systematic execution, and, well, a clear set of rules are paramount.
It's a fascinating setup. We're essentially staging a compelling intellectual showdown here.
We are. We're looking at two radically different philosophies. But here's the kicker. Both have been profoundly successful in their own ways.
That's right. So on one side, we'll sort of channel the spirit of Reed Hastings' rules from Netflix,
Yeah.
Championing that unbridled employee freedom, radical candor, and this almost unwavering trust in top talent.
The whole idea there is basically if you hire the absolute best, your biggest job is just to get out of their way. Let
Yeah.
them run.
And then on the other side, we'll delve into Ray Dalio's principles. This advocates for a meticulously designed, really systematic framework, extreme transparency, a meritocracy of ideas, all guided by explicit, almost ironclad rules.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? You've got the wild creativity of almost anarchic freedom versus the precise engineered excellence of a finely tuned machine.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today, our listener, is really to unpack these two powerful approaches. We want to explore their core tenets, maybe uncover some of their surprising successes, and definitely examine the inherent tensions between them.
Yeah, because there are tensions. By the end, hopefully you'll have a clearer perspective on how to think about fostering a high-performance culture in your own context. Armed with specific insights, examples, maybe spark some genuine aha moments.
And look, this isn't really about picking a side. It's more about understanding the powerful levers available to you as a leader, or even just as a team member.
Okay, so let's set the stage for this deep dive. What truly drives organizational excellence? This challenge, how to maximize productivity, innovation, employee engagement, it's genuinely universal, right? Every leader, every manager, they grapple with this.
Oh, absolutely. Peter Drucker, who's often called the father of modern management, he highlighted something really profound. He said that management itself is kind of a historical first. Well, it enables the productive employment of large numbers of knowledgeable, skilled people. Societies just couldn't achieve that before on this scale. Think about that for a second. It's not really natural for all these diverse talents to just come together and work effectively.
Right. It takes deliberate effort.
Exactly. So the fundamental challenge for any organization really becomes how do you effectively orchestrate all these incredibly diverse individual contributions? How do you get them pointing towards common goals? At its core, it's a huge design problem, almost like a social engineering puzzle.
And right at the heart of that design problem, there's this deep fundamental tension. It's like a constant push and pull.
Definitely.
It's the balance between granting individual autonomy, letting your brightest minds run free, explore new ideas, trusting them to self-direct, versus establishing organizational control, making sure everyone operates within a coherent, predictable system.
And each approach holds immense promise, but also, potential peril.
Totally. Think of it like a brilliant jazz musician. Do you give them total freedom to improvise? Which could lead to breathtaking new melodies, but maybe also some dissonant notes, right?
Or do you insist they follow a meticulously documented score? That ensures a polished, predictable performance, but maybe less spontaneous magic.
Exactly. That's the tension we're talking about, that sort of wild energy of individual genius against the orchestrated power of the collective.
And our two champions for these philosophies, they really embody this tension perfectly. They give us these great case studies on either side of the spectrum.
So on one side, who do we have?
We've got Reed Hastings, co-founder of Netflix. He represents that no-rules rule philosophy, really focusing on radical candor, high freedom, and high responsibility. His mantra is essentially hire the best, then have the guts to get out of their way.
Hire the best and trust them.
Okay.
And then the counterpoint.
Then we have Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund. His philosophy, laid out in his book Principles, is all about a systematic approach. Clear, explicit rules, building a meritocracy of ideas through this rigorous, almost machine-like framework.
I'm a machine. It's a powerful image. It's about designing an organizational operating system that runs optimally, almost trying to transcend individual personalities and biases.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this no rules idea first, because honestly, it sounds almost counterintuitive, especially for a huge multi-billion-dollar company like Netflix.
It does seem radical on the surface.
Imagine a workplace where bureaucracy is minimal, where trust isn't just some buzzword on a poster, but the absolute foundation of everything. And your primary responsibility is simply to do great work, not to navigate some restrictive handbook.
That's the essence of it, the no-rules culture, heavily inspired by Netflix.
Then the core philosophy seems to be maximizing freedom, because the belief isn't just that freedom is a nice perk, it's actually a strategic lever for unleashing peak performance.
Right. The foundational belief, and you see echoes of this in leadership thinking like, say, the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, is that if you hire truly outstanding people, like individuals who are strong leaders themselves, who take initiative, own their outcomes, you just don't need extensive rules.
They'll self-direct.
Exactly. They'll naturally take ownership, they'll deliver. But here's the real insight I think that often gets missed. Netflix isn't just saying trust your people. They're making a really calculated strategic bet.
A bet on what?
They're betting that the cost of bureaucracy, the endless meetings, the approval chains, the rule following for its own sake, that cost far outweighs the perceived risk of an individual making a mistake sometimes.
Ah, okay. So the no rules isn't just philosophy. It's a strategic weapon for speed, for disruptive innovation, things that traditional structures might actually choke off.
Precisely. That's the aha moment for many. Freedom as a competitive advantage, not just a feel-good perk.
That is a powerful and, somewhat audacious argument, especially when you're dealing with highly skilled folks whose decisions could have massive ripple effects.
It requires a huge amount of trust, no doubt.
So beyond just empowering the best people, this freedom-first approach also seems to champion something really human: authenticity.
Tell me more about that.
Well, because if you've gone to all the trouble of hiring these brilliant people, the last thing you want to do is stuff them into some kind of corporate straitjacket, right? Make them act a certain way.
Makes sense.
We're talking about ideas like radical candor, which Kim Scott popularized. It's essentially about caring personally while challenging directly. Scott points out that the common corporate advice to keep it professional often forces people to deny essential human feelings.
Which can lead to feeling alienated,
Yeah,
disengaged.
exactly. Feeling like you have to wear a mask at work. Instead, a freedom-oriented culture emphasizes being comfortable expressing your true self, because that genuine self is far more likely to commit deeply, creatively to the work.
Like Howard Schultz at Starbucks. He talked about maintaining passion and personal connection even as they grew huge.
Right. That illustrates how this freedom approach can be rooted in intrinsic motivation, shared values, not just rigid guidelines. It's about connecting with the whole person.
So it's not just valuing the job function, but the whole person, complexities, motivations, everything. That sounds great on paper, but couldn't it also lead to, unproductive emotional debates if it's not managed really carefully?
That's a totally fair challenge. And I think the proponents of this model would argue that the candor part is just as crucial as the radical part. It's got to be direct, honest feedback, but given from a place of genuinely caring about the person's growth, not just venting or unrestrained emotion.
So there's a skill to it.
Definitely. And this environment, this psychological safety, is also seen as crucial for fostering innovation itself. Think about it. In dynamic, rapidly changing markets, rigid adherence to rules can actually become an impediment to the very innovation you need to survive and grow.
Like the Patagonia example.
Exactly. In Let My People Go Surfing, they talk about how the company was literally forced to rethink our priorities and institute new practices, and actually start breaking the rules when they outgrew their old ways of doing things. It shows you need that adaptability.
So a no-rules environment implicitly encourages challenging the status quo, which is vital for disruptive creativity and staying competitive.
Precisely. It's about giving people permission, maybe even the expectation, to question, to experiment, to try new things, even if they sometimes fail. Failure is seen as data, not disaster.
Okay. Which naturally leads us to the key enablers. What actually makes a freedom-based culture like this work? It can't just be no rules and chaos.
No, definitely not. It relies heavily, as we mentioned, on radical candor and trust. It's not enough to just say, be honest. You need an environment where direct, honest feedback isn't just tolerated, it's actively expected, valued.
Radical candor, the book emphasizes this builds deep trust, helps people improve by giving them the unvarnished truth, right? Stops people from repressing their authentic selves at work.
Yes. You're giving people the psychological safety to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, and the expectation that they should. It's part of the job.
And tied to that is this idea of protected think time. What's that about?
It's really about valuing what Cal Newport calls deep work, actively protecting dedicated time for employees to engage in truly focused, cognitively demanding tasks, free from the constant barrage of emails, meetings, Slack notifications.
The stuff that fragments our attention.
Totally. Kim Scott, in Radical Candor, advises people to literally schedule in some think time and hold that think time sacred. She even jokes about getting really seriously angry if someone tries to schedule over it.
Wow.
It just underscores the importance of individual autonomy over your own productive time. If you truly trust people to do great work, you have to give them the space and the time to actually do it, not just fill their days with meetings and busy work.
And this autonomy extends to working relationships too, right? Self-management, adaptability.
Yeah, exactly. Empowering individuals to understand and adapt to different working styles, rather than forcing everyone into one rigid method. Peter Drucker, back in Managing Oneself, made a great point. He said, bosses are neither a title nor a function. They are individuals and are entitled to do their work in the way they do it best.
And he suggested it's up to the people working with them to observe, figure out how they work best, and adapt themselves to help their bosses be effective.
Right. And that principle really applies to all colleagues, not just bosses. It's about building relationships based on understanding individual strengths, preferences, communication styles, rather than expecting everyone to fit a single mold or follow a universal playbook.
Okay, so if you pull all this together, the trust, the candor, the think time, the adaptability, what's the payoff? What does this freedom-based approach ultimately cultivate?
Well, the argument is that it cultivates extraordinary creativity, agility, a really strong sense of ownership, and deep personal investment from employees, all of which leads to truly high performance.
It's about tapping into intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. When you empower people to embrace what feels like their calling or vocation, as Max Weber's work sort of hints at, driven by internal motivation rather than just external controls or rules, the potential for both output and personal fulfillment is just immense. It's about igniting that internal fire, that deep sense of purpose, rather than simply paying for hours worked.
Okay, that's a really compelling case for freedom. But what's fascinating here is that while that appeal of freedom is undeniable, and Netflix is obviously a powerful example, many of the world's other incredibly successful high-performance cultures, like Ray Dalio's Bridgewater Associates, seem to thrive on almost the exact opposite.
Predictability.
Clarity.
Frameworks.
Exactly. Predictability, clarity, continuous systematic improvement, often achieved through very explicit frameworks. So my perspective, drawing heavily on Dalio's work, argues for building what he calls a meritocracy of ideas through a rigorous machine.
A machine. Tell me more about what that means in practice.
Well, it starts with absolute clarity and expectation management. A highly structured environment ensures, as Dalio puts it in Principles, that everyone knows what someone is like, you know what you can expect from them.
Okay, so eliminating ambiguity is key.
Huge. It reduces political maneuvering, fosters incredibly reliable collaboration. The whole approach aims to create a reliable organizational operating system, a predictable foundation so that complex, high-stakes work can be done consistently, effectively. Everyone knows the rules of the game, how decisions are made, how performance is assessed, so they can play more effectively without hidden agendas or confusion.
So it's really about creating this highly predictable ecosystem.
Yeah.
Where things are less about individual interpretation, maybe less about personality, and more about a shared understanding of the operational process itself.
That's a great way to summarize it.
It sounds incredibly efficient, but maybe also potentially very demanding on the people within it.
Oh, it is demanding, absolutely. But proponents would say it's demanding in a very specific, objective way. See, this commitment to absolute clarity isn't just about setting expectations up front. It's actually the bedrock for continuous, almost relentless growth and improvement.
How so?
Because once everyone understands the game, the system, you can then systematically help them play it better. And that's where Dalio's approach really leans in. His principles explicitly emphasize the need to constantly train, test, evaluate, and sort people.
Wow, sort people. That sounds intense.
It is. It involves a really frank assessment of their strengths and weaknesses,
Hmm.
followed by a plan for how their weaknesses can be mitigated, maybe through targeted training or maybe by reassigning them to roles that are better suited to their strengths.
And this applies to everyone.
Dalio stresses that no one is exempt from this kind of criticism at Bridgewater. The aim is an objective, depersonalized approach to growth. You see echoes of this drive for quantifiable improvement in other places too, like the complex bonus system described in Extreme Ownership, may be overly intricate, but it was an attempt to measure and reward specific behaviors within a structured performance framework.
That sounds incredibly rigorous, almost clinical. Is there a danger, though, that such an objective, depersonalized approach, while maybe efficient, could also stifle genuine, unpredictable creativity? Or maybe even alienate those unique talents who don't quite fit the machine perfectly?
That's a critical question, and it's definitely a risk if it's not managed with extreme care and, frankly, a degree of wisdom. However, Dalio would likely argue that by making the criteria explicit and objective, you actually remove subjectivity and bias from the evaluation process.
So creativity isn't necessarily squashed, but maybe channeled, tested within the framework.
Exactly. The goal is to identify the best ideas through rigorous testing and debate, not just listen to the loudest voice or the highest ranking person. And a really critical aspect of these strong frameworks is their ability to mitigate human fallibility, our cognitive biases.
Ah, like the stuff Kahneman talks about in Thinking Fast and Slow.
Precisely. Explicit rules and principles act as safeguards against our individual impulses, our emotional reactions, the cognitive biases that can derail rational decision-making. Kahneman explains we have two systems. System 1 is fast, intuitive, emotional, prone to biases. System 2 is slower, deliberate, logical.
And System 2 is the one that can follow rules.
Right. Kahneman says System 2 is the only one that can follow rules, compare objects on several attributes, and make deliberate choices between options. Without structures that engage System 2, our intuitive System 1 can lead to impulsive and impatient decisions, like the examples he gives of people failing the cognitive reflection test, making short-sighted choices, preferring less money now over more money later.
So robust frameworks protect the organization against inherent human imperfections, especially when the stakes are high or decisions are really complex.
Exactly. You're essentially building an external system too for the organization. It's not just about efficiency. It's about safeguarding against our own human quirks and blind spots when errors could be catastrophic.
Okay, that's a crucial point. So what are the key components that make these strong frameworks actually work in practice?
Well, first, explicit goals and measurable outcomes are absolutely non-negotiable. You need clearly defined objectives, quantifiable metrics. These guide efforts and enable objective performance evaluation.
Like Peter Drucker said.
Exactly. Drucker, in The Essential Drucker, asserted that each manager's job must be focused on the success of the whole, and they must be able to measure his performance and results against the goal. And critically, those measurements need to be clear, simple, and rational.
You see this historically too, right? Like
Yeah.
at GM.
Yeah, Alfred P. Sloan Jr.'s experience at General Motors, which he detailed in My Years with General Motors. After a near disaster in the early 1920s, they realized they had to gradually put system and method into the introduction of the corporation's models. They formalized procedures for product approval. It was a clear evolution towards structured frameworks, born from the sheer necessity of avoiding another catastrophe.
So step one, know precisely what success looks like and how you're going to measure it. No ambiguity allowed there.
Precisely. Second key component. Standardized processes and systems for scalability.
Defining the how.
Exactly. When you define the how, you ensure consistency, you can predict quality, and it makes scaling the organization far more efficient. The E-Myth Revisited makes this point powerfully. It argues that when you systematize a process, even something complex like selling the collective result can be far more extraordinary than just relying on individual, maybe inconsistent brilliance.
They talk about using scripts.
Yeah, a series of scripts defining the entire interaction. Now, that's not necessarily to stifle creativity in the moment, but to elevate consistency, predict quality, and make every interaction reliably excellent. It's about building a machine that reliably produces results, almost regardless of who is operating it at that moment. That allows for consistent, predictable growth.
Okay, so clear goals, standardized processes. What's the third piece?
Strategic discipline and focus. This is crucial to prevent resources from being scattered thin.
Avoiding those Waterloo strategies.
Exactly. Principles guide the allocation of resources, the focus of effort towards clearly chosen strategic paths. It prevents dilution. Loftley and Martin, in Playing to Win, emphasize how, at P&G, clear and simple, easily translatable choices were crucial to get 135,000 P&Gers in 90 countries operating with excellence every day.
So you need those clear where to play and how to win choices.
Yes. They caution against those vague something for everyone strategies or dreams that never come true, plans that lack concrete choices. This discipline ensures resources aren't scattered, that everyone is pulling in the same direction within clearly defined, but still potentially empowering, boundaries.
Okay, so what's the ultimate payoff of this principles-based approach then?
Well, the argument is you get unparalleled operational efficiency, consistent quality, and a culture of rigorous self-correction. These are absolutely crucial for long-term stability and success, especially as organizations get larger and more complex.
So for listeners managing complex projects or maybe trying to scale a business.
Established principles offer a clear roadmap, a safety net against the potential chaos that can sometimes arise from unbridled individualism. It's really about minimizing surprises and maximizing reliability, allowing for that predictable, sustainable growth.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because often, these two powerful philosophies, radical freedom on one hand, rigorous frameworks on the other, they aren't just different paths running parallel.
Yeah.
They can actively conflict, right? Create real friction, significant challenges that leaders have to navigate really thoughtfully.
Absolutely. It's not just about choosing one or the other. You have to understand where they naturally chafe against each other. That's where the strategic dilemmas lie.
So one major area of tension seems to be innovation versus control. We touched on this, but rigid frameworks, while providing stability, can inadvertently stifle those really new disruptive ideas and the agility you need to pursue them.
The innovator's dilemma talks about this, right? How disruptive projects often stalled in established firms when it came to getting scarce resources.
Exactly. Their existing value network, that whole web of customers, suppliers, internal processes, and their current powerful customer needs, often dictate a focus on sustaining innovations, just making existing products better. It makes it incredibly hard for radical new ideas, things that might serve a completely different market initially, to gain traction.
So the framework itself can blind them to emerging markets or revolutionary changes.
Yeah. And what's truly insightful about this clash, I think, is how often organizations design their processes perfectly for today's sustaining innovations, and then they wonder why they can't adapt to disruptive change. The framework isn't just accidentally stifling new ideas. It's often explicitly built to filter them out if they don't fit the existing value network.
Wow, it's like a self-preservation mechanism that, ironically, could lead to self-destruction in the long run.
Totally.
But then, on the flip side, as we also noted, unbridled freedom can lead to chaos or redundancy. Too much autonomy without enough direction or coordination. That can result in fragmented efforts, wasted resources.
Like what the discipline of teams warns about.
Precisely. It warns that too many small groups get stuck in the single leader discipline. Or even when they try teaming, they do it more in the name of togetherness instead of performance. Without clearly defined collective work products or understood criteria for how tasks fit together, efforts can become inefficient, unfocused.
So it's not enough just to have a group of smart individuals running free. You need some way to function as a cohesive unit with a shared understanding of what you're collectively trying to produce. Otherwise, freedom just becomes, well, unmanaged chaos.
Exactly right.
Okay, another major conflict seems to arise between individual genius and the organizational system itself.
Ah, yeah, the superstar versus the structure.
Right. Exceptional individuals, people operating with a high degree of freedom, they can come into direct conflict with evolving organizational frameworks, especially around things like compensation or power structures.
The Louis Ranieri story from Liar's Poker is a classic example, isn't it?
It's perfect. Michael Lewis describes Ranieri as this brilliant, big-picture guy who basically invented the mortgage bond market at Salomon Brothers. But his style, loose, loud-mouthed, and brash, and his feeling of having freedom to do anything I want around here, eventually just clashed head-on with the firm's attempts to systematize things.
Especially when it came to pay, right? Like that trader Howie Rubin making $30 million for the firm, but only getting paid $175,000.
Yeah, which led to Rubin leaving. And ultimately, Ranieri himself was purged, Lewis writes, and his whole family of traders got displaced. It just showcases this fundamental tension between that raw, individual entrepreneurial spirit that creates immense value and the evolving corporate desire for control, consistency, a predictable framework.
And what's really highlighted there is how a framework, even if it's intended for efficiency, can completely fail to recognize or retain unique, maybe eccentric talent if it's too rigid, or if the compensation model just isn't aligned with the actual value being created by that individual freedom.
So the very talent you rely on for breakthroughs walks out the door, costing the organization far more in the long run than any perceived risk from giving them autonomy in the first place.
It's a classic trap.
And then there's the personal framework of a leader, like Steve Jobs. His biography describes his tendency to see the world in binary terms.
Yeah.
A person was either a hero or a bozo. A product was either amazing or shit.
No middle ground.
Right, and that kind of uncompromising personal framework, it absolutely drove a relentless pursuit of excellence. It fostered incredible innovation through incredibly high standards, but it also created this high-pressure, potentially alienating environment. It led to significant internal friction, high turnover. It was basically his way or the highway.
Which produced revolutionary products, no doubt, but extracted a heavy toll on the human system within Apple.
Definitely.
Which brings us to this need for adaptability, especially in what some call a protein environment, just a fancy way of saying a rapidly changing, complex, unpredictable world.
Like the one we live in now.
Exactly. And rigid command and control structures can prove fatally slow in these conditions. Team of teams makes this argument really compellingly. In environments with too many possibilities to plan for effectively, we must become comfortable sharing power.
They use that United Airlines example, right?
Yeah, their inability to respond quickly to that viral customer complaint video. Why? Because employees were more restricted than ever by the Perry principle, that tendency in hierarchies to push decisions upwards, centralize control, which completely paralyzes action when speed and local autonomy are crucial.
In a world where a single tweet can blow up a brand overnight.
You need people on the front lines to have the power to react, the trust to make decisions right then and there.
But hold on, you mentioned earlier that Dalio's framework at Bridgewater is designed for continuous evolution, for improving the machine. So is a static framework the real problem here? Or maybe just a poorly designed one that doesn't adapt?
That's a great point, and Dalio would absolutely argue his system is designed to adapt. It's meant to be a living framework, constantly testing, refining both its people and its operational design through feedback loops. However, let's also consider the psychological side of this. The burden of freedom and maybe the inherent human desire for some direction.
What do you mean?
Well, not everyone actually thrives with absolute undefined freedom. It can be overwhelming. Many individuals maybe subconsciously seek clarity, structure, direction. There's that profound insight from Theodor Adorno, quoted in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, about German fascism. He partly attributed its success to people feeling unequal to the freedom that fell into their laps.
Wow. The quest for effective life had become an overwhelming burden.
Yes, leading to this psychological yearning for structure, for decisive leadership. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? How much of our perceived freedom in some organizations is actually just unmanaged chaos? And how much of our control in others is just an illusion of order?
That's a fascinating and, frankly, pretty sobering perspective. It suggests that well-designed frameworks, maybe at their best, can provide a sense of psychological safety. Clear pathways.
Yeah.
They can reduce anxiety and allow people to focus their energy constructively.
Exactly. But what happens when that control becomes utterly disconnected from the people it's supposed to serve? When the framework becomes the master, not the servant?
Then you run into what some call the Robert Moses problem.
Ah, the power broker himself.
Yeah. Robert Moses, the infamous New York urban planner, chronicled so brilliantly in The Power Broker. He often imposed his grand, large-scale visions, tearing down vibrant neighborhoods for massive highways by simply shouting down reformers. He'd use his experience as justification, completely disregarding the human context, the needs of the communities he was impacting.
Like getting rid of that cheap ferry service.
Exactly. Eliminating a popular, cheap ferry just to force traffic onto his new tolled bridge, which cost 50 cents for a round trip instead of a nickel, a huge burden for many working people back then. It exemplifies a rigid top-down framework imposed without enough feedback, without consideration for those affected. It leads to these unpopular, socially damaging decisions.
The framework loses its humanity. It starts serving only itself, and it can become, well, tyrannical in its own way.
Which raises the big question then. So what does all this mean for you, for our listeners, for your organization? Is there a middle ground here? Or does one philosophy ultimately have to prevail? Given these deep tensions we've just dug into, it seems pretty clear there's no simple either answer.
No, definitely not.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It seems the most effective leaders, the most resilient organizations, they often find ways to intentionally combine elements of both approaches. They create a nuanced, dynamic culture that deliberately leverages the strengths of each.
So it's not about choosing either, but designing an and approach, recognizing the paradox maybe of control and autonomy needing each other.
Exactly. And this often manifests in what you could call values-driven frameworks, kind of a soft control. Instead of having prescriptive rules for every single scenario, you have a strong, deeply understood set of shared values, a clear mission, and that acts as an implicit framework, an internal compass, guiding autonomous decision-making when the rulebook runs out.
But how do you really embed values so they become that active compass, not just, words on a poster in the break room?
That's the million-dollar question. Look at Patagonia again. They didn't just write down environmentalism. Their leaders went on those legendary walkabouts in the actual Patagonian wilderness.
Yeah.
That solidified the values through shared visceral experience. Plus, they have a relentless focus on hiring people who already embody those values.
So it's about living them, telling stories that reinforce them, ensuring leaders consistently model them.
Right. These aren't just soft ideals. They become the invisible algorithms guiding decisions when the explicit rules are silent. Same with Starbucks, right? Emphasizing that their fundamental core values and purpose won't change, even with massive growth. Maintaining that passion, style, entrepreneurial drive, and personal connection. These values become the essential guardrails for freedom.
And to make that work effectively, you also need to cultivate integrity and maturity as individual operating principles within your people.
Absolutely. Stephen Covey, in The 7 Habits, highlights integrity aligning your actions with your values and maturity, balancing courage with consideration as crucial for effective interpersonal interactions, for finding those win-win solutions.
Which implies that truly effective freedom, the kind that doesn't descend into chaos, requires individuals to have a robust internal operating system, a personal framework.
Yeah, I think so. Imagine an employee facing an ethical dilemma not explicitly covered by a rule book. Their integrity, their maturity, that's the compass guiding them to the correct value-aligned decision. It's about empowering individuals who have that strong inner compass to begin with.
Okay, so moving beyond that soft control, we also see the success of what you might call empowered execution within strategic boundaries, essentially flexible frameworks.
What does that look like?
It means providing real strategic clarity, which then enables decentralized action. A clear, well-communicated overarching strategy allows individuals and teams to operate with significant freedom, but within those defined playing fields.
So the art is setting boundaries that are clear enough for direction, but maybe elastic enough to encourage innovation within them.
Exactly. Think of it like a sports field. The lines are non-negotiable. Out of bounds is out of bounds. But within those lines, the players have immense freedom to strategize, improvise, execute creatively to score. P&G, in playing to win, achieved this. They defined not just what markets they'd play in, but how they intended to win in them. That gave teams huge autonomy on the execution, the how, within that clear strategic what. That's a really empowering sweet spot.
And crucially, this isn't a one-time thing, right? It needs continuous feedback loops.
Yeah.
Adaptive systems.
Absolutely critical. Rather than relying on static rules that might become outdated, the most successful organizations create built-in mechanisms for constant learning, adjustment, iteration. The lean startup is all about this, isn't it? Advocating for constant adjustments with a steering wheel called the build, measure, learn feedback loop instead of rigid, complex plans.
It's a dynamic framework for rapid adaptation, integrating feedback directly into the process so the system itself is always improving.
Right. And similarly, Blue Ocean Leadership uses tools like as-is leadership canvases and to-be leadership profiles. These are analytic visuals used to hash out differences over what leaders are actually doing versus what the desired future leadership behaviors should be. It demonstrates a structured, collaborative approach to evolving the culture, not just enforcing static rules.
So it's about having a system that can learn and evolve, not just conforce, fostering collective intelligence over time.
Precisely. And perhaps the ultimate example of blending these approaches lies in the paradox of leadership itself. The need to somehow balance grand vision with meticulous detail.
The Steve Jobs paradox again.
Exactly. The most impactful leaders often possess that rare ability to combine visionary freedom, seeing what could be, with a relentless pursuit of meticulous detail and execution. Or, maybe more realistically for most, they effectively delegate these aspects, fostering an environment where both are valued. Jobs, as his biography notes, was a master at putting together ideas, art, and technology. He didn't invent many things outright, but he brilliantly synthesized, designed the Mac after appreciating the power of graphical interfaces, created the iPod after grasping the joy of having 1,000 songs.
So he pushed innovations by being good at the big picture and simultaneously mastering details.
It's that incredible combination. It suggests that the most successful high-performance cultures might be led by people who can embody both the freedom to imagine and the discipline to execute. Or, perhaps more scalably, they foster an environment where these two seemingly opposing forces are harmoniously integrated, respected, and deeply valued throughout the organization.
Maybe the deepest insight here is that the most robust systems aren't necessarily rigid structures, but more like fluid architectures built on shared understanding, clear values, and continuous learning. It's about having the vision to see beyond the current rules, but also the discipline to build the framework that makes that vision a reality for everyone reliably.
That's a great way to put it. So, look, we've navigated the compelling arguments for both radical freedom, drawing inspiration from Netflix, and for rigorous principles and frameworks, exemplified by Ray Dalio and Bridgewater. Both approaches have clearly demonstrated profound advantages in fostering high-performance cultures.
And as we've seen, both come with their own distinct challenges and potential pitfalls. It's clear that neither approach is some kind of silver bullet. They're more like powerful but very different tool sets.
Right. So what does this mean for you, our listener, in your own quest to build and lead high-performing teams? The answer, as we've really explored today, is rarely going to be a simple either choice.
It seems it's much more about consciously, intelligently designing a culture, one that deliberately leverages the inherent strengths of both freedom and frameworks tailored to your specific situation.
It's about understanding when to loosen the reins, maybe encourage more experimentation, and when to tighten the structure, ensure consistency, or manage risk.
It's about being really deliberate in your design choices, thinking critically about your specific context, the industry you're in, the maturity of your team, your overarching strategic objectives. What does your situation call for?
And maybe to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on. In our increasingly complex, unpredictable world, does true freedom in an organization actually lie in the complete absence of rules? Or could it, perhaps counterintuitively, lie in the intelligent design of clear principles and truly adaptive frameworks? Frameworks that actually enable agile, self-determined action while also fostering a greater capacity for collective learning and resilience.
How can you cultivate a system where your team isn't just performing based on today's plan, but is continuously evolving, getting smarter, ready for both the challenges you can foresee and maybe more importantly, those unexpected black swan events that inevitably come along?
That's the ongoing challenge, isn't it?
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration gives you some fresh perspectives, some new ideas as you think about cultivating high-performance cultures in your own world.